Are you ready to travel through time and stir shit up? I friggin' well hope so, because I'm here with Nierika, self-described time-traveling shit disturber from the Shaman's Dream Project. You can find the Shaman's Dream Project on YouTube. We met very briefly at the Greater Reset in Morelia 2024, and we briefly exchanged messages in Telegram. Through time, they percolated in this moment in which we are reuniting to stir shit up and I don't know, get down to some ancestral wisdom. Thank you so much for joining me on episode 110 of the Be Yourself and Love It podcast on the Conscious Resistance Network. Namaste to you. So, you are some kind of a magician, I think.
No,
Would that be fair to say?
actually, we all are. We all are.
Okay.
It's all of us are born into this world as co-creators, and with our corona chakra, provided we didn't download any viruses in there,
Well, okay, I see what you
we're
mean.
we're connected to the Great Spirit, and so we all of us are magical creatures, but due to various different I don't know if you want to call them influences.
Mm-hmm.
It could be peers, it could be parents, it could be professors, pastors, preachers, politicians, propaganda, and the good old, conformity that we sacrifice ourselves, we murder ourselves. And as Ayn Rand said, a great philosopher, Ayn Rand, she said that the first act of violence we commit against ourselves is the act of self-murder. That means to silence our voice and silence what is waiting to come out of our heart, and it be expressed through our voice. And for the sake of conformity, that we just get along and go along, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not really anything special, no more special than everybody else. It's just that I was perhaps one of the rare people, especially at the time that I was so-called growing up, back in the 70s and 80s. I was one of the very rare people who stood outside of the dangerous crowd and refused to conform. And in this way, I sort of paved the way for others at this moment, young folks such as yourself, and
Not
even
that
the
young.
younger children. Well, you're right. You're not. You're a very ancient soul, but
Oh, thank you.
for the people to remember, hey, who am I, and what am I here to do? What's my soul contract? Did I come here to conform and comply? Did I come here to receive the approval of others, or did I come here to be a unique individual with a unique message and a unique set of talents and gifts to contribute?
Right. So we've got a lot to cover today because I know that you're into eco-architecture and stuff like that, and I really want to talk about that. But running with the theme that came up first about authenticity and things, I'm also a huge fan of Ayn Rand, and one of the things she said I really liked was this idea of only I know. She just took it as an example of how her philosophy sees things differently from other people. Oh, I did something bad, but only I know. I can steal from my employer because only I know. And she said, what an insult or an assault it is to a human being's self-esteem to think, well, if other people know, then that's such an affront to me because, oh, what do other people think? But I don't even care about my own judgment of myself. Surely it should be worse for me that I'm the one that knows. It would be better if I had a character flaw and everyone else knew about it, but I just didn't know about it, because then at least it would be, an authentic character flaw. It wouldn't be something that I deferred. I murdered myself. I went to the crowd to get my judgment, my self-esteem, rather than finding it within. And obviously this has become increasingly relevant over the last 4 years, because those of us who thought we were somewhat awake thought the world was pretty bad in terms of conformity and selling your soul. But we saw a lot of people just simply go along to get along. So I always like to try and bring these like global things back to the practical, that everyday life. I started Be Yourself and Love It podcast because I thought the self-help industry was too full of philosophizing,
Mm.
and um it was too, all these cheesy slogans like crush it and take massive action. It wasn't relatable. What I said is, like, instead of just focusing on the world, let's get back to this, like, how do I apply this in my day-to-day life? And then by extension of that, we change the world by being ourselves and loving it. So
Oh,
so on that point, this authenticity, it's not just about saying these COVID regulations are bullshit, and if you're going to vaccinate me, then I'm going to leave my job. It's more like, I want to say something to my girlfriend or a dear friend of mine, but I'm afraid that if I express needs, I will be perceived as needy, and that will push that person away even more, who I'm already not getting what I want from in some way in terms of connection or responsiveness. And the difficult thing about that is, you kind of, to quote the thing about that is it's partially true, as Jordan Peterson might say. Sometimes actually, if you do express needs, you do push people away. They do think, oh, that. So how do we navigate in this like crazy world where not everyone knows how to hold the space or be there for each other? How do we overcome the anxiety from childhood, whenever we, expressed ourselves honestly, we got attacked, and we carry that from our childhood into our adulthood, and we recreate it. We surround ourselves with people who, who are partly supportive, but also in certain areas they fall off. I know I'm putting a lot of responsibility on you to answer such a big question, and I've been talking a long time, so please have the floor.
oh, okay. So, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's very pertinent. It feels very pertinent at this time because of various different things. Of course, we're all self-murdered on one level or another. Um, um, but to take instead of focusing on, well, see, we can see this issue and we can see this inauthenticity, and we can see all the Prozac smiles of the people and the social justice warriors marching down the street. We can see the manifestation of the Kali Yuga, which is, the society without borders. Literally and rhetorically speaking, I have no even safe healthy boundary of my own physical skin suit, my
Hmm.
own avatar,
Hmm.
to not have to wear a face diaper or slave muzzle, or not have to
Hmm.
smother my body in toxic hand gel, or
Uh-huh.
receive your bioweapon injection in my arm, and so on and so on. But these are just 3D physical manifestations of that which is within.
Hmm.
Because if we kind of just go back to the basics, which is natural law and the Hermetic principles, and we can just say, as above, so below, as within, so without. So if
Hmm.
I see this manifested in the society around me, then what is my calling if not to go back within and go on my own sort of vision quest, my own
Hmm.
rite of passage, my own time of reflection, to say, what is it am I projecting outwards? And going back to the needs, um, I would say that, once we do go through our vision quest, once we do participate in our rites of passage, whatever tradition that may be, uh, that we become the self-reliant individuals, and that all the things that we need are already there, and we
Hmm.
can connect with that. And then when we connect with that and we realize that everything we need is already contained within our sacred hearts, and then that is our point of projection to project out into the field. And in this case, the only folks that you will attract, well, I won't say the only folks, you're going to attract a lot of folks, but you will have others brought into your field that will have the potential to bring to you the other things that you feel you need from
Hmm.
without. So uh, but first, first and foremost, to realize that everything we need is within ourselves, and and not to like look outward but
Mhm.
rather to look inward, because that's where it begins.
Okay, very good. And what about the fear of hurting other people's feelings, but that comes along with being authentic sometimes, especially if we're sensitive and kind and caring of others. You want to speak your mind, but you don't trust that other people. I don't know. I think
Yeah,
you get my drift.
totally. Story of my life. And it's a challenge for me in my life, as well as it is for the rest of us now at this time, is to find some sort of diplomacy, if you will,
Hmm.
in the way that we express ourselves, to ensure that we deliver the message that we want to deliver from our heart in, what to say, the least offensive manner, but ultimately residing within ourselves in the fact that if you feel triggered by what I say, especially if I put it in such a way as I let you know, listen, can I please share something with you? Can I be honest with you and give you my honest, authentic feedback that I am feeling within my heart? Can I express that to you? And can you please, know that I do not intend to cause any, how do you say, hurt feelings?
Hmm.
But that if you are triggered and if there is some feeling of dissonance within you, then let that be a sign that within you there is some disconnect. Because if you were in your power, in your balance, and you had your divine masculine and your divine feminine aligned, not the feminine up here out of control without any boundaries in the Kali Yuga, because if those two are aligned, nary the twain shall meet. But
Hmm.
rather within myself, I have the holy trinity of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And if those are aligned, then I give birth to this, the first geometric shape of life, the pyramid, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that this is what I project. And if something does cause that dissonant feeling within you to make you become upset or angry or have your feelings hurt or something, then let that be a signal to you that there's
Hmm.
something out of alignment. Because ultimately, let's just remove ourselves out of the skin suit, out of the avatar for just a moment, and go back to remember who we really are. Essentially, we are electromagnetic beings residing inside of a skin suit vessel.
Hmm. Yeah, and also to be willing to take the time to hold space for the response of another person to what you've said, and not feel like you need to jump in and mitigate if they feel ashamed or upset or even angry. You can say, "Oh, I can see that you're very angry about that," and let them go, "Well, yes, I am, because X, Y, and Z." And yeah, well, I could see that. I could see why that might piss you off. I guess I'd be pissed off in that situation as well. Yeah, and it's amazing what happens when you just acknowledge people's emotions and allow
Uh-huh.
them to
Uh-huh.
have those
Mhm.
emotions. Um, I think um, really seen the benefit of that in my relationships. Even something like jealousy or something like that. When you don't try and say, "Oh, well, you've got nothing to be jealous about because blah 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 blah." You just say, "Oh, okay, yeah, I could see. Well, yeah, why do you want to tell me more about that?" And that creates a more open space for authenticity in relationships, I've found. So
Absolutely.
when it comes to, I mean, there's been a lot of stuff in the last couple of years coming forth on electroculture, and I've seen quite a lot of the podcast feeds populated with things on that. So I'm kind of interested because I know that you know about architecture and building things in harmony of the planet. I've deliberately um, withheld myself from finding out what you know because I want everyone to come on a journey of exploration along with me to finding out what you've got to share in this respect. So it'd be really interesting to hear what it is and how you got into it.
Okay, well, hmm. So, well, ever since I came out of the womb, I've realized that there's just something NQR about this place, not quite right. And as I started reading at a pretty young age. I think I was around 3, and I've just been reading ever since. Never watched the
Mhm,
television. Never really got into the Holly weird, trying to project things into my imagination. But rather, I say this is my my sacred imagination, my seed and seat
Mm.
of consciousness. So I will be very cautious and conscientious about what I allow in there in my sacred space. And because this channel is relatively clear and free of all the dissonance from the propaganda and the peer pressure and the need for conformity and the need to receive the acceptance of others and things like this, then this channel is open for me to receive downloads from the universe. And I have for my whole life, but more recently, it's been a lot of communication with, let's just say, spirits that are not yet born. We'll say children waiting to be born, and they're saying, "Hey, I need you to do this and do this and get this and get this." And I say, "Okay, I'm just here to create a safe and secure place, a beautiful, magical, mystical place for the little children who shall lead the way." To create the space for them so that they feel safe and secure and free to express and be their authentic selves and to learn and grow to their highest potential. And in this way, when I said these words, this is my mission statement, this is my objective for the sacred water, for Mother Earth, for all the life that they support, and every decision, every thought, every action, every intention, everything I do is in consideration of the 7 future generations. Thy will, Great Spirit, not my will. But for the 7 future generations, I do what I do. And when I brought all this into alignment, then the downloads started coming. And I was receiving messages from unborn children, which we can talk about later in another podcast if you'd like to delve into that more specifically. But suffice to say, I received the instructions to build the house that I have exactly the way it is built. It incorporates numerology, sacred geometry, symbology. I refer to it as intentional esoteric bioconstruction design. So intention is everything. My intention, as I stated, is for the 7 future generations, for the sacred water, for Mother Earth and all the life that they support. And then with this, then I take it to the next level was, well, what can I create with my magical hands and my magical mind and my magical heart? uh, in this space to align with my objectives, right? Because we're always seeking that alignment. Otherwise, nary the twain shall meet. Um, and in this way, I received the downloads to build a house using a bioconstruction, of course, and the Fibonacci sequence, and I've incorporated a 369 spiral into the house too, because those are always useful and very powerful pieces of technology that we can work with to manifest our dreams and to project into the unified field of consciousness. Um, and then from there, all the offshoots, will come. You mentioned electroculture. Well, I'm talking free energy devices and
Mhm.
anti-gravity vehicles too. Um, and to basically um, there's a song in that we sing in the ceremony in the Spanish, and it translates into English by saying all the solutions is found in nature, because nature is come from, where do we get that word? Entomology is a good subject to get into, because if you want to know the nature of the tree, then find out the fruit that it bears, right? Or find out the root, the seed, where it comes from. And nature comes from a pre-dynastic word, a pre-dynastic Egypt word, natur, N-A-T-R, which referred to the supreme spirit, great spirit, God of all the other gods and goddesses that created everything. So if natur is the great spirit and where we get everything from, then why not go to that source? Why not go sit on the mountain for 4 days and 4 nights with no food and no water, praying and fasting and sacrificing? Because always there's a sacrifice, right? This is how
Mhm.
we buried
Yeah.
the pharaohs, to remind us in our cosmic
Yeah.
midnight hour that first we must give with the
Mm.
masculine, and then we receive with the
Mm.
feminine.
Yeah, and I used to be very uncomfortable with the idea of sacrifice. But as I grew older, I realized, you can only do something at once. Being doing this podcast means I'm not tidying my room or something. You can choose something. So there's always um a price to pay in life, for and what you want to do is trade a greater value for a higher value. You gain so much from fasting, and when you break your fast with that slice of watermelon, hopefully something high water content, oh my god, does it ever taste good, better than
Oh
any
yeah.
any slice of watermelon that you ever tasted before.
Oh
You
yeah.
gain something more over
Mhm,
over and above what you
mhm.
give. So you said that you used eco design and eco construction. It'd be really interesting to hear how you learned about that, and you might need to. I didn't define electroculture and and eco design and things like that for the people at home.
Okay, so
Oops.
I didn't about
Oh.
it per se. I just I set the intention that I don't want to live in a concrete box.
Hmm.
I don't want to live with the shapes that um how do I say, angles of pain. The square is a masculine symbol, and
Hmm.
that's fine. And we need the masculine, but to be on the outside of the circle. In other
Hmm.
words, the male provides the protection and the boundaries for the feminine to reside,
So
the
true.
circle of life to rely. And you'll find this epitomized in various different symbols all over the world. But um, here in Mexico, we refer to this as the chacana. And and what we do is we when we begin to envision with these symbols, then we realize that concrete boxes conducive are not the best place for us to be if we're going to live to our highest potential, as we need, because the universe is based on geometry, the universe is based on sacred geometry. So if we incorporate this into our lives, then we are sending out a signal, as well as providing a roof over our heads, where we live, where we work, where we breathe, where we dream, where we sleep, right? To live in this way, and then from there it flows. So what is, we open up that door and just take a step in that direction, the universe will respond. That's the way the construct works. So the rest of it was just downloads. I really didn't learn anything so much. I didn't study anything so much. I just knew that that was my intention, and then I set that intention, and then everything kind of just fell into place. So, insofar as bioconstruction materials are concerned, you're looking at all kinds of stuff depending on what's locally available to you. Where I'm at here in the Mesoamericas, we could grow hemp and use it for hempcrete and hemp furniture and hemp lumber and hemp rebar. And I want to give a big shout out to my friend Belinda Carr, and I ask if you can include in the show notes a link to her channel. She's a very lovely, holistically intelligent, and highly intellectual young lady from the East, from India. She's an engineer and an architect, and she hosts a podcast. And she brings on these people who are making things like hardwood furniture that's 400 times harder than Brazilian cherry wood, or hemp rebar that's 4 times stronger than steel, and doesn't rust, and all kinds of things with hemp. So I'm a big fan of hemp. Not only will this plant sequester the carbon from the air, which,
Yeah.
by the way, is not necessarily a bad thing. Of course, the pollution that the industry and the exhaust from all the vehicles and stuff, for sure, that can be pulled out of the atmosphere, and this plant will do that. The hemp will return all of that, transform and transmute it back into the earth to restore the health of the soil.
Yeah,
So
it's
you're
one of the
clean.
wonderful one
Oh,
of the
this it's
sorry.
amazing. This
Yeah,
plant will literally save us. It will literally,
and
literally.
it's amazing how they managed to ban industrial hemp in the USA and many other countries. When you look at the functions of first of all, is it not true that the Constitution, the American Constitution, was made of paper created from hemp? So In addition to that, when you say clear cut a forest, the quality of the soil is terribly compromised by that because the the trees are in symbiosis with the soil and improve the soil.
Absolutely.
If you grow hemp on that soil for 4 or 5 years, it begins to improve the quality of the soil, and that's often a really good way to start on the project of restoring a forest. You first plant hemp. It can be made into well, um, so many of the things we currently use plastic for could be replaced with hemp products, and I don't know
Mm.
what we're doing with our plastic. I don't like the fact that it goes in the ocean and things like that. Um, uh, but yeah, it's interesting how the powers that shouldn't be somehow managed to convince people to allow them to ban industrial hemp when we were once again becoming again aware of how useful it is, and perhaps of course that's why it was banned.
Well, let me just kind of go back and remind the audience writ large, all of us children of Mother Earth, that our words cast spells.
Hmm.
Okay. So when I say the powers that are, I am
Hmm.
giving my,
Hmm.
I'm giving them power. They are
Right.
the powers that were. And it's not just because I say this. Of course it
Hmm.
is because we agree that the powers that were,
Hmm.
but it's also based in what the ancestors told me in the 500-year prophecy,
Hmm.
that the time in the divine order of things, the conquistador system of death and destruction was allowed to run rampant. And if we really want to just take that to a beyond a 500-year prophecy, we can look at the larger time frame, how they measure it in the eastern hemisphere, which is the yugas. And
Hmm.
we can refer to the Kali, the goddess of Kali, which, if you're not familiar with that, everybody's seen the picture where it's like this goddess and she's got all these hands and holding up severed heads, and
Right.
the severed
She actually beheads Shiva the destroyer. There's she's pictured with the severed head of Shiva, the destroyer in her hand, and she has her foot on his chest. Like she's got the power to behead the destroyer. It's an amazing picture
Kali.
image.
Kali is the eastern version of Venus, according to the Greek mythology. Venus was born out of the head of the mountain of Zeus or whatever, right? But the Eastern philosophy says that Kali was born out of a mountain,
Hmm.
and she gave birth to a child, and she loved the child, and she cared for the child, and she, you know, nursed and fed the child and all these other things, right? The nurture, and then she ate the child. So it's over here in this Mexico, we refer to this as the Tetzcatlipoca. It's different
Hmm.
names depending on where you go, but it's the same concept, that it's always the divine feminine that creates and gives the life, and it's always the feminine that takes the life. So so um what I want to say about, the powers that were, is that their time on the stage is finished, and
Hmm.
I'm not even like angry at them. I'm not like, I'm not going to feed my emotion into the field to
Hmm.
give anything any kind of power, because I don't want to give that power away anymore. I want to contain
Hmm.
that within myself to create the sacred dream of my heart. And so what I do is I communicate telepathically using my 369 spiral and some other technology, that I communicate to the grandchildren and the great grandchildren and the unborn children of all, including the families of the elite,
Hmm.
powers that were, to say,
Hmm.
look, you don't have to be afraid of losing your hegemony. You don't have to be afraid of being put out of business. I have I don't have anything, but rather we are with this plant on this earth, that we can take your
Hmm.
concrete industries, take your steel industry, take your lumber industry, take the construction industry writ large, take the petrochemical industry writ large, and replace it
Hmm.
in such a way, retool your existing businesses, so that I can guarantee 1,000% return profit just by way of reducing your capital overlays. Imagine if like down here we have something called Carso, and they get all the no bid contracts. He's like one of the richest men in the world. He gets all the no bid contracts to pour all the cement all over Mexico and Central and South America. And we could say, look, I have there's a hemp that you can continue to be in business, but you'll just reduce your capital outgoing in such a way to increase your profits by 1,000% in 1 year or less, guaranteed. Now tell me how that's not possible. That's not even fathomable in the mind of the average businessman. Will say, oh no, anytime you start up a business or change the way you do business, there's always going to be this delta between the retooling and the profit, right? And that's not the case at all. It's going to be immediate profits, because you don't need your heavy equipment, you don't need your bulldozers, you don't need your dynamite, you don't need to blow up the mountains, you don't need to light the fires to burn to create the steel, you don't need all this heavy equipment to transport all this heavy material, this dense material, this steel, this concrete, etc., across the country. We can have decentralized production within a certain field, and then that provides employment to everybody in this space. And then you just have like one processing facility per pueblo of however many people, to process the plant, and then from there it spits out all the cottage industry. So what I'm talking about in this case, if I just put it really simply, up north in the United States, we had, or had at least, something called the Fortune 500 companies. I believe it's the Fortune 100 companies, because in the divine order of things, and because evil sows inside of itself the essence and the outcome, and the destruction of itself is within the seed, right? If we can change the way that we perceive things and look at things instead of from a win-lose, zero-sum perspective, we can apply a win-win perspective. So just in the case of hemp, cleans the air, cleans the soil. That's already 2 wins right there. And then the knockoffs from there is all the health problems that we incur because of the toxic and polluted air that people are breathing. That is resolved. All the health problems that we create by toxic food that's grown in soil that doesn't have any natural biodiversity and has to be sprayed with pesticides and herbicides, that's another win and another win. And then the frequency that this plant emits, because if you look at the leaf of this genre of plants, of the species of plants, it's got 5 parts to the leaf, just like us. It's us. There's more. That plant has more in common with us than just, I think, about any other plant on the planet Earth. And the frequency that it will change the frequency, the vibe of the entire area in which it's planted. So that's another win. And now we can go from seed to harvest in 4 to 6 months, as opposed to waiting 80 or 100 or 200 years for this hardwood tree to grow up and then mow it down. So in essence, it's a way to work with power instead of force. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's very compelling. So basically, either through the legal system or various things have fallen out of um, general knowledge, like the fact that we have alternatives to the mainstream industrial industry. I had just very recently George Wiseman, who was using Brown's gas, talking about how when he grew up on a farm, he used to rig up the vehicles so they ran so many more miles to the gallon than anyone else's car, and he did it just because he didn't know that he wasn't allowed to do it. And then later on, he found when he tried to post out kits to people, the U.S. Postal Service intervened and wouldn't deliver them to people. Then I had Roy Turnbull from Gaiazyme on, and he was talking about how just by getting people to test their soils, he could find out what micronutrients they were missing, and a lot of the time they'd over fertilized their soil with macronutrients. As soon as they added the micronutrients, then they got amazing results, and the food's obviously more nutritious, and it's actually profitable. He's not saying to people, oh, you should do this because it's good for the environment, although he's very dedicated to bringing this knowledge forwards because he wants people to farm in a way that's congruent with the environment. Actually, it turns out to be more profitable to them as well, which is why he, unlike a lot of industries in the environmental sector has actually been able to turn a profit with these organizations. So I think I'm very, very excited that we're actually at a time where a lot of the knowledge of this is coming back out. And for all it worried the hell out of some of us, the mass compliance with the COVID regime, one thing that it's done is it's brought a lot of people who see out of the mainstream together that were very fragmented before. And podcasts have organized around sharing information regarding what we can do to improve the situation without deferring to government or industry, but by being the change we want to see in the world. So when you think about that concept of like not deferring to authority to make a positive change, but um going inside to find our own inner
Mhm.
authority, what kinds of things have you done and would you recommend that people can look into doing? I know we've all got our internal guidance system which we need to consult, but it's good to have some suggestions from someone who's a little bit further along the path of living in this authentic way. So have you got things for us at home who might be bumbling along wanting to make a difference?
Mhm. Well, I'm just going to defer to my rule of thumb philosophy, which is to say, as long as I believe it, I will see it.
Mhm,
And as long as I like I'll just say it the way I had a conversation to my friend
mhm,
just this morning. Um, and when we were talking about taking her farm, which is where she had been growing this plant, but a different species, a different type within the cannabis. She was growing it for the THC. And she said, well, the government says I can only grow 4 plants of this. I was like, well, why are you applauding? Why are you giving your attention to an actor on the stage whose time is done?
mhm,
The actor is not going to get off the stage as long as you're applauding and standing up and throwing roses and bringing bouquets of flowers. This is a rhetorical way of saying, as long as I continue to give credence and homage and attention and energy towards the powers that were, they're not going to leave the stage. And if they don't leave the stage, then they're going to continue to bring this dissonance, which is going to interfere with that which I am trying to create. And so, in this way, I literally don't care. Now, what the government says, for instance, how many plants I can grow. Because maybe, 50 years ago, it would have been an issue. Maybe even 20 years ago, it would have been an issue. But as I said, according to the prophecies of the ancestors, this is all written in the stars, Anthony.
mhm,
This is not my perception of things. This is based on 50 plus years of esoteric research and discovery and reading everything I could get my hands on, especially the things you're not allowed to read. And the world is a magical, mystical place, and we are magical, mystical beings. So why do we give away our power? That's the first and foremost. We take back our power. We remember what our ancestors said here about the 500-year prophecy. We know it's written in the stars that their time is done. That's why a lot of them are running into their underground bunkers and wherever they're hiding out off planet. I don't know. But that's all in divine order. I do not care about the details. For me to worry about how this divine intelligence, this creation, this great spirit, the creator of everything, is going to fill in all the blanks and sort out all the details is not for me to worry about. Rather, I only place this in my
mhm,
sacred imagination, and I have this sacred heart of a child, this dream, right? And then I'm aligned. If it's thy will, great spirit, then then all else will fill in the blanks. So we don't need to get too
mhm,
caught up. We don't need to get too caught up. We will just be led in the way, right? That we are
mhm,
meant to go. Um, so I just want to take that perspective and shift it back to one of power, that to take back our power. But as long as we continue to give a rat's fucking ass, if I can be honest and use cuss words. I
Use as
just
many
don't
fucking
care.
cuss words as you like. I'm from Scotland, you see,
Awesome.
where the C
N-
word is considered a term of endearment. So,
Yes, it is. It sure is. I know. I lived in the UK for 3 years. Yeah. And I just want to mention about where you're from and anybody else that's hailing from that area, that this Holly Day. I talk about holidays versus holy days on my YouTube channel. I have a whole playlist series on that, and how we should be very conscious and cautious about participating in the unholy rituals on Caesar's calendar of fake time, because it is a ritual. Everything's a ritual. When you go to the movie theater and you take in the Hollywood movies, first of all, you exchange energy by way of currency, a current of
mm,
energy, and get your little ticket. And then before you go into the movie theater, there's a guy standing there at a turnstile, and he takes your ticket and rips it in half and gives you back what? Your
a
half
stub.
of the
Oh,
contract.
mm,
It's a ritual. Everything's a ritual. Your half of the contract to say whatever I project from that screen into your sacred imagination, into your eye of Horus, into your mind's eye, your third eye, your seed and your seat of all that's created in the world, without your knowingness and your discernment to be able to put up a barrier, a healthy boundary to say that this is not for my entertainment so much as it is for my entrainment.
mm,
Uh, then in this way, we begin to take back our power. Another example is, let's just say the weather, right? Let's just say the weather. So down here in the Spanish word for the storm that comes is the tormenta, which is torment, right? In English, right?
mm,
Well, if we are tormented within ourselves because we have murdered ourselves and suppressed our authenticity in this world, and denied the execution of the soul contract which we came here to fulfill, if we murder that, then everything else flows from there. Does that make sense?
mm,
So right, so here come the tormenta, right, the storms. Rather, what I would do is, when a storm comes like it did last year in October, I see there's like 6 different houses. There's 6 houses in my neighborhood. All of them left. They all packed their cars and took off for various different places to get away from the storm that was coming. I don't watch TV. I don't use social media. I'm not on the artificial intelligence device. And I don't give a shit what the dangerous crowd is talking about. And I sure as fuck don't believe in the weatherman who's trying to also dictate the narrative to me and take away
mhm,
my power. But rather, I just sat in my house and I watched all the people leaving. I said, "Hey, where are you guys going in such a hurry?" And they, "Well, I'm running off to Tepic, or I'm going to Guadalajara, or wherever they're going." "Okay, well, safe journeys, and I'll see you when you get back." And then later that night, I got a call from one of the neighbors from Tepic. He was in Tepic already at that point. Oh, and he was all, "Wow, how are things over there? Is everything okay? Is electricity cut? Is any roofs missing from anybody's house? We hear on our Facebook, our Instagram, or Twitter, or whatever fucking narrative that's out there trying to dictate the way I create my reality, huh? The way I believe." Um, he's hearing this on his social media that there's a category 4 hurricane. I'm like, "No, I'm sitting here. The lights are on. The signal on my phone is still going. I have 2 little grandpa statues outside of the window. You know, those little rocks that you stack on top of one another. Super skinny ones, very
mm,
fragile. You could blow them over like, and they would blow over. And neither one of those had blown over. So there was a nice, gentle rain, a nice, gentle breeze. It was actually quite pleasant. It kind of cooled things off a little bit because it had been hot and muggy before. But my point being is that because I have not allowed my sacred imagination, my seed and seat of all that's created and manifested, to be influenced with this false narrative about a category 4 hurricane. And because all those who did believe in that and who were manifesting that left the immediate vicinity, then I am there alone with my energy and my sacred geometry. And no storm. No storm. None. It was, I wouldn't even call it, it was less, it wasn't even a category of any kind. It was just like a gentle rain. It was very nice. So explain that to me. And then also explain that at 3 times over the course of 2 years, I went to the Temescal, the sweat lodge. And the guy who runs the sweat lodge looked up into the sky and sees these dark clouds coming. And of course, you know, you can't allow it to rain on the Temescal because of the material it's made with, it will melt, right? It will destroy the Temescal. So the Temescal has to be covered in a tarp or some kind of waterproof material. And he said, I might have to cancel the Temescal because here they're looking like the rain is going to come. Well, what is the rain if not the torment, if not the emotion, if not the consciousness that's within ourselves being reflected without? So I just said, hey, Marciano, let's just give thanks for the water. Let's just give thanks for the rain, especially here in this dry forest. But let's just ask the rain if it's okay that we hold a sacred Temescal to pray for the water and the family and all the relations, if he can wait or she can wait. Well, it's actually he, because water falling from the sky is masculine. And let's just ask the rain if he can wait until after our Temescal. And all 3 times this storm passed and allowed us to do our Temescal. And after the 4th door was finished and we all left the Temescal, here come the rains. And do you know, after 3 times in 3 years, Marciano still refuses to believe that, because he chooses to remain in the system of the conquistadors with the programming that he has received. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Okay. So we are, we've been convinced that we are not part of the environment. We've been alienated from nature. I think you're talking about how you integrated these concepts like sacred geometry into the building of your house. What's your, I don't know if you're what do you think's coming down the pipeline in the next year or 2 or 5 or 10 with our movement? How do you see things going? Do you think they're going in a particular way, or is it still completely up to us?
Well, first of all, I don't make the mistake of thinking.
Okay.
That's a function up here, which is only a part of the Trinity. Recall what I said about nary the twain shall meet. There's the mind and there's the heart. If within the body itself, there's the mind, there's the heart, and then there's the phylogenetic memory down here in the root sacral chakra area. So it's one part of it to think, but the other one is to feel, and the other one is to recall. So yes, it's a species with amnesia and in the divine order of things, so that the infinite consciousness can explore the depths of its depravity through this devolutionary period that we like to refer to as the Kali Yuga. But now that time is over. It's written in the stars that we are moving out of the 4th world, that the Mayans refer to the 4 worlds, right? Into this 5th world. But the Mayans did not depict a 5th world precisely because of what you just said, Anthony, because it is entirely up to us. We are being called by our Mother Earth to get up off our knees and get out of this infantile state that we are in, because the human race is a very infantile genome project, I will just say. And now we're being called to get up off of our knees and take responsibility for the relations that we have with ourselves, with one another, with the sacred water, and with Mother Earth. And because of this, because of the different frequencies that are availing themselves to us now, because this actor, his time on the stage is finished and the clarity is coming back to us, that we will automatically receive what we need as long as we acknowledge that it is there. It's like asking for spiritual intervention, but first you need to acknowledge that your spirit guides are there. First, you need to acknowledge that the four sacred directions are there, that the ancestors are there. Does that make sense? So it's like
Yeah, so I heard a lot about ascension to the fifth world, and I was already a New Ager early in the thousands, and between about then and 2012, I heard a lot about it. It seemed to go away for almost 10 years, and then all of a sudden it started coming back in the last few years. Um, what do you attribute that to? And is this like people thought, eh, maybe that was just a myth, but all of a sudden it's come back again. I've got one more question after that,
Mhm,
um, and then we'll probably start to wrap up.
mhm. Well, I don't really call it the new age. I call it the new cage because
Exactly.
it's not a question of whether or not there are obstacles in our path. Of course there
Mhm,
are, but the question is do we have the discernment, the
mhm,
inner self-knowingness,
mhm,
and are we equipped with the knowledge of our ancestors and the knowledge of the esoterics, and do we understand things in the divine order, or are we just stuck on this timeline looking at it like this is the year 2000, this is the year 2020? um it always comes back to perspective, because
mhm,
whatever is my perspective is going to influence everything else. So um, um, yes, it kind of comes up and shows itself as this, and then it kind of fades away because it's not the full truth.
mhm,
It's only a snippet of it. It's just to say, hey, this is
mhm,
here, and then it kind of
mhm,
fades away, and then it shows up somewhere else on the timeline
mhm.
as something else.
Okay.
um, and what this means to refer to is that the human race is a very infantile race, and we have gone through our four worlds of exploration in a cycle of seven. This is an eight. In numerology, 2024 on Caesar's calendar of fake time is an eight. What is an eight? An eight is a one, because
Mhm,
it's seven cycles are done. And now we begin
mhm,
the next cycle of seven with eight, when the number eight. Eight is also the caduceus that goes
mhm,
over the magician's head in the tarot card,
mhm,
or the infinity symbol is
mhm,
a more modern way of saying that word, the caduceus, the
mhm,
never ending, the alpha and the omega, the never ending exploration of consciousness, of infinite
mhm,
consciousness that wants to know what it's capable of. It's
mhm,
not a question of whether or not the consciousness loop will continue. The question is, where is our balance?
mhm.
Right?
Very interesting. So when a lot of people in, I wouldn't say, I've said to my girlfriend, it's not a movement. We've got a bunch of interrelated movements, and each of us consider ourselves a member of some of those movements, and we don't agree on everything. And that's a good thing, because if we did agree on everything,
Mm,
then you'd be wondering if anyone was thinking to ourselves. But when a lot of people in the movements that we're associated with look around, they don't see evidence that they deny that they don't they feel like, if anything, things are going backwards, that we're not transcending the age of the conquistadors. If anything, we're like driving off a cliff or going straight into a scene out of 1984. So can you do
mhm,
anything to
mhm.
um,
First, yes. First of all,
lift
I
the
would
spirit?
go back. I would go back to the root. What
Hmm.
the issue is I perceive it is that, first of all, well, to create, we say
Hmm.
in Spanish, what say to believe, say que crea, and
Hmm.
CREA. Well, they put the R on the end, so just take CREA and put a TE. So to believe and to create is one and the same. My eyeballs, which are cameras to take a picture of the reality that I create with my real eyeball, my mind's eye, my what do I believe? What do I envision? What's inside here? That is what is created in the world. And then my eyeballs just take a picture of it. So,
Hmm.
no, I do not need to see it to believe it. I need to
Hmm.
believe it to see it. Hmm?
Hmm.
That's the first and foremost thing. And then, what was the second part of your question about, the people that are? believing
Yeah,
in.
it seems to a lot of people feel very pessimistic after all they've seen
Mhm.
over the last few
Yeah.
years. They thought they expected a much bigger growth in our movements. They expected more people to wake up, and if anything, they found out
Mm.
that people were a lot more asleep than they even thought. So,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
they're not optimistic that we're transcending the age of the conquistador. How can you allay their concerns?
Well, I can't really allay their concerns because it is not my responsibility to bring
Hmm.
inner peace to them. Okay.
Hmm.
They must find that within themselves. And if they choose not to, that's fine too. Then they will create the dystopian reality that they choose to continue to focus on because they are not getting up off their knees and taking back their power.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I see what you mean, which is
Okay.
why I'm always. Do you have something to add?
Y- yes. So, in the sense that we are moving along this timeline, this concept of time, at this particular point in the timeline, is that any time you have a shift or a change or a prayer or something you want to see manifested, there is always a sacrifice involved. There
Mhm.
is usually a blood sacrifice. When you want to shift and change timelines, there's always a blood sacrifice that's required. So perhaps because I do not know anything, that's the only thing I do know is that I know nothing. I do not know the mind of infinite consciousness. I do not know the plan of the great creator, right? But I can take an objective look at the reality, knowing that there is a blood sacrifice required to shift the timelines. And I can say thank you to all the people who fill in the blank. If they
Mhm.
had their xiphoid process breached with some 16-inch long stick to so test themselves for a virus that's apparently everywhere, uh, then whatever is going to happen to them, and they're going to check out of the skin suit. Likewise, those that receive the jab, they'll check out of the skin suit. Likewise, those who choose to continue to applaud the conquistadors on this. Mother Earth is telling us to get up off our knees and dream a different dream with her. We have the free will choice not to do that,
Mhm.
just so long as we're aware that there's always consequences that come with our choices. And maybe it is in the soul contract of these individuals who want to continue to be filled with self doubt that they do
Mhm.
continue on that timeline. That's fine. They will be removed from the reality which you and I are creating, let's say, not just you and I, but many others. And they will be brought into a timeline and into another reality that is better suited for their learning.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you so much, Nierika Tere, for joining me on Be Yourself and Love It podcast. You at home, I invite you to dream a little dream with us. Be yourself, but of course, don't just be yourself. Be yourself and love it.